Good morning and welcome to AIM 2019. We are excited to kick off another great conference. Our first session is a sponsored presentation by SmartRent. Maximize your leads, how to increase conversion and lower costs with unattended showings. There's no denying that technology has become a major component in reaching potential renters. As marketers, you rely on technology to help measure and track the success of a campaign. But the real ROI comes from turning a lead into a renter. So what can you do to increase these conversions? Utilizing technology for unattended showings can not only make your job easier, it will provide benefits outside of just the marketing department. Join SmartRent and a panel of industry-leading experts as they discuss how they increased their conversions and lowered costs with unattended showings. Please welcome Mitch Karen, your moderator.
We have some great content to share with you today, led by some of the brightest minds in the industry. We'll start with Sean Mahoney, Senior Vice President, CIO, and CTO of GID Windsor Communities, and Taylor Whitaker, Director of Innovation Services at BH Management. So give these guys a round of applause for helping you out today. And of course, I'm Mitch Karen with SmartRent, Chief Product Officer. For those of you who don't know what SmartRent is, we are a home automation and smart building vendor for the multifamily industry. And one of the primary benefits of our solution is enabling self-showings. So kind of before we get started, quick show of hands, who is in the early exploring, researching of self-showings? Quick little show, okay?
Right.
It's hard to see. Okay, fair good amount. Who is doing a beta pilot testing right now? Few, okay. Anyone doing full deployments? Okay. Who is not doing anything at all because you're scared of doing it or just don't want to do it yet? Okay. Seems like most people are still early on. Okay. Anyway, quick little agenda. I'm gonna give a little state of the tour update before we dive in, but we're gonna go through the whole process for you guys, talk about strategies for implementing. These gentlemen have two very different strategies for implementing the system, so it's, again, some really great content. We're gonna go through the identification, validation of prospects, kind of run through the prospect journey, and then end with the follow-up, post-tour follow-up, data aggregation, kind of all that good stuff, and of course, how to maximize your ROI and convert leads. Again, before we jump in, we'll stay the tour. So tours in general, self-service has become fairly ubiquitous in a lot of industries. I can't remember the last time I rented or stayed at an Airbnb where I had to meet the property manager there. Have you guys ever, last time you did that? Always keypads, maybe a key box still. But what's even more prevalent now, this kind of speaks to the self-service, is you can go and buy cars and buy houses without seeing anybody. So here's a good example. Open Door, you may have heard of Zillow Instant Offers, OfferPad. You can now go tour properties without an agent to buy them. And Carvana, I don't know if you guys have seen this, these are kind of funny. It's basically a car dispenser. And you don't have to talk to anybody, you can go buy a car basically. So what this tells me is that if people are willing to make these very large investment purchases, upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars for a house, it's becoming more and more commonplace for people to do self-tours. When it comes to multifamily, obviously, it's different. I don't know how you guys have received in the single-family rental space, but actually, myself, prior to joining SmartRent, we launched the first keyless self-showing platform in the single-family rental space at Colony American Homes, which is now Invitation Homes. And it was a huge success. Overnight, we saw benefits not only from an ROI perspective, but we did lots of surveys, and renters and prospects simply just liked the idea of being able to go tour a property themselves. So while, of course, that's not the same as multifamily, we can definitely learn a lot from that. So let's dive in now. I kind of want to let the panelists take over, give their fairly different strategies. Low tech versus high tech. And Sean, why don't you start us off with giving your GID and Windsor strategy.
All right, so I'm Sean from GID. We're also known as Windsor. You might know us better as that. But we started this process probably about a year ago we started looking into the whole idea of self-showing. What really got us going on that was that if you really think about it, pretty much everyone who's in the apartment renting cohort right now grew up on the internet doing self-shopping. When they wanted to know something, they went to the internet and they looked it up. But if you came to our apartment communities, what happened? You came, you sat down, it took 15 minutes of sitting around, trying to diagnose your needs, create urgency. It was really antithetical to the way these people grew up renting apartments. I mean, buying everything else. So it's like, well, why can't they rent an apartment like they would rent or buy everything else? Because it's consistent with the way they do things, and it's a better experience. So that's what kind of got us going on it. And then we thought about it, and we realized that, hey, everyone here is a winner because people can come tour. The tour will be much faster. They can spend as much or as little time as they want. And it can give us flexibility for our staff. I mean, a lot of you folks, who has their offices open on Sunday? Anyone? A lot of people, like our leasing agents, the first thing they said is, wow, maybe I won't have to work on Sunday now. So they were very interested in the whole process. So we started off very easy, even though the CTO and I love technology, we just started off like, all right, why don't we figure out what apartments are available. We'll give a self-touring option on the web. They'll come in, we'll give them keys and a map, and they can look at the apartments, come back, drop off the keys, and leave. And then we'll follow up. That's our approach. So pretty basic.
Yeah, I mean, you got to start somewhere, though. But and again, leveraging the technology isn't an easy thing to do. You got to have the right systems in place. And so that kind of brings me to Taylor. Taylor, why don't you give us a little background on what you guys are doing at BH?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Taylor from BH, as I think we've already stated a couple of times, but just in case you guys walked in later. Definitely a different approach than Mr. Mahoney over here. So one of the things that BH has really prioritized in the past few years is really embracing new technologies and innovation and making sure that we're staying consistent as far as the actual experience that we're providing our residents with that technology. So recent and really the last 2 years, the big buzzword has been smart home. Well, we're kind of past that now, and we're more onto how can we leverage that smart home infrastructure and architecture to bring the next level, which we believe is the self-touring and self-showing component. Because the entire communities are smart and because everything is connected, it is very easy for us to put a piece of software in place that allows for us to control permissions on making sure people that are touring, they don't have access to the wrong places in the building that they're not supposed to have access to. It gives us the ability to really view what are their likes and dislikes based off how they're actually following the tour themselves. And because everything's done through the digital platform, we can do all of our communication. We can even allow for that resident or prospective resident, if they're in the unit specifically, they can actually request to have somebody from the leasing office join them in that unit to have a discussion upon their request. So that way leasing agents aren't wasting their time. They're spending more time engaging with those who actually want to engage, as opposed to having to just mindlessly give tours to people that may or may not even be interested. So we just believe that by leveraging this connected component that we're going to be able to embrace self-touring, but also learn a lot more about our prospects in the same time.
Great, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about, obviously, thank you both for the great overview. I want to kind of go through the full-on process. So from the initial identification and validation phase, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. There's obviously no standard in the industry, still early on. There may never be a true standard. And again, based on what you've already designed from a user journey standpoint, your authentication may be different. Whether, that kind of also ties back to the property type, meaning the high rise where you may have a concierge on site 24/7 may have a different journey than a garden style property where there isn't anybody 24/7. Maybe there's a security guard walking around, but he may not be able to validate everybody at any given time. So would you guys mind kind of diving in and giving us a little overview of what you guys are doing from both the identification and validation phase of users in that particular journey?
Okay, do you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so, I just want to back up. So I would say that we never viewed self-touring as a 100% solution. A lot of times when you think of technology, like you think of self-driving cars, people think of this car that's, you're not going to have your hands on the wheel and it's just going to go do stuff. I mean, people thought of self-touring the same way, but we really see it as aspects of self-touring are very good. And for us, it really starts with buildings that have a doorman or a concierge. And we view the self-touring benefit is really to people who can't make it during office hours or in a hurry. So what we've done is we've really extended the hours to a couple before the leasing office is open. So let's say the leasing office opens at 10. Maybe we open for self-touring at 7 and we go till 9 at night. And then what'll happen is, to answer your question, they'll come in and they'll give us their license. So first of all, they'll be on the website. It all starts with the website. They go onto the website. They indicate that they want to have a self-tour. They can see the calendar when self-tours are available. They come in with their ID, and we just hold their ID. We don't scan it, though we've talked about that. And for some reasons, we don't do it. The primary one is that some people object to our scanning the license. Not many, we've had that. And also, it really creates a PI situation. So PI means personal information. PI is like hazardous waste, right, in your shop, right? It doesn't mean you can't have it, you just have to treat it a specific way. So if I have a scanned license, I have to have certain procedures around how I store that, how I delete it. In California, there's the California Consumer Privacy Act. People have the right to forget, so I'd have to have that system forget the license. So there's a lot of issues around that, so we just don't scan the license yet. And then they give the license, they get the keys, they go on the tour. The license is kind of a carrot for them to come back, right? They just can't walk out. They get their license back, we follow up with them, and that's it.
Makes sense. Very cool. So really where we see the authentication coming into play primarily is because, as Mr. Mitch over here mentioned, we have two very different asset styles. So GID primarily, they do a lot of high rises, whereas BH Management, we use a lot of garden styles, podium styles. We don't do high rise in those types of markets. So it's difficult for us to build systems around having somebody present. Instead, we really need to leverage technology to replace people, but not necessarily in the way you may think, right? So we're not trying to replace leasing agents. We're just really trying to help extend hours and make the property more available. But as self-showing is still a very new technology, we do believe it's still a privilege, which is why we have no problems actually asking for a picture of their ID. And we leverage current technology that actually can verify whether or not the identification card would actually be, genuine or not, right? Or if it's a counterfeit. So before we allow anybody to actually engage in the self-touring process, they've already uploaded a picture of their ID. We've already confirmed, and we don't store that information. We really just do a check. The system pings us back and says we're good to go. And then at that point, they can actually move forward with scheduling the time which they'll be on site. So essentially upon arrival, because we have authenticated them, we know that we can give them a temporary passcode to get into the unit they're looking to tour. And really at that point, we can also completely eliminate the need for models as well. Because if we are allowing prospective tenants to come in and view the actual apartment unit they're interested in renting, it kind of defeats the purpose of even needing models, especially when it's during hours when no one would be there to show the model anyways. So we think authentication is going to be key in the future, because right now, even though we can only verify kind of identification, we hope at some point to be able to verify income and everything before they're ever on site. So that way, if for whatever reason, they're applying, they're interested in this one apartment community, and they go through our verification process and it says, hey, you may not be a fit for this specific property, we can redirect them towards properties within our portfolio that do fit their profile. And that way they're not wasting time, we're not wasting time. And like I said, it really does help maximize the time that our leasing agents are spending with the actual prospects themselves, just giving them their time back in the day.
Thanks, guys. So, Sean, you guys don't really do much fancy pre-qualification style software up front. It's really just go on the website, pick a time, go to the property, hand over the ID. While Taylor, you guys seem to be using some newer tools out there that are actually scanning IDs and kind of giving a quick little background check almost. Cool.
Yeah, it's funny. We actually do scan IDs in some places. Like there are some markets where there's a lot of scammers out there. So before we let someone take possession of the apartment, we'll run their credential through a check, right? But we haven't integrated into self-touring yet.
We'll get there.
We might. So I'll have to see. It's really, we're learning every day. And for us, it's all about convenience and making the tour fast. So we surveyed our residents. We surveyed 1,000 residents, the last 1,000 move-ins before we did this, and we asked them like 7 questions. But one of the questions was, how long do you think the ideal apartment tour should last? Anyone want to guess how long that is? Yeah, it's between 15 and 30 minutes. And then we did secret shops. We sent people out with cameras, hidden cameras. We did shops, right? 14 minutes, 13 minutes, 17 minutes. These people, they're just in and out. You know, what they're really doing is they're validating what they saw on their website. Like if you have a nice website, people are shopping on the website, then they're going to come and say, all right, well, is this really an accurate physical representation of the place I saw on the web? Does it look safe? Do I feel good? And if it is, those people who are self-touring, I would say, are probably more likely to rent than just someone who walks in off the street.
Agreed.
So.
Yeah. A quick little background too, at my last job, we actually in-house built a custom pre-qualification system online that let a prospect upload their photo ID. This was back in 2013. So back then it was a little new to the market, but it was actually quite successful for us. We were able to eliminate most of the leasing staff. And again, single family is going to be different than multifamily. I don't want to use the term eliminate by any means, but yeah, the identification process seems to be getting better and better. The tools out there are faster, more easy to implement. And so sounds like Taylor and BH have been doing a pretty good job on that side. Next, kind of what I want to talk about is the prospect journey of actually being at the property. We kind of talked about this a little bit for both of you guys, but I kind of have 2 images here. Sean, obviously concierge style, walk up, hand over the ID, give them a key. And Taylor, you guys have your garden style properties, more of like a route. Actually, Taylor, why don't you start with this one? Can you give us a little background on what the expectation is when the prospect shows up? Well, actually also give us a little bit of background on what information you give them to prepare them for a successful journey once they get to the property.
Absolutely. So it's actually kind of a hybrid. So what we do during the actual verification process, and I would like to just pretense all this, this is still has not been implemented wide scale yet. We're still testing the system and we're working on implementing. But the way that it does work is whenever they're actually going through the part where they're taking a picture of their ID, confirming that it's them, they're answering a couple of little brief questions along the way, and it's kind of peppered in so we're not just berating them with questions. And it may ask them, how often do you work out during the week? Do you have any pets? Those sorts of things. So before they're ever at the property, we're already starting to build who is that prospect and what is it that they'd be interested in. And based off, as you guys can see here on the slide, you can see that we have beacons in the apartment itself, the fitness center, the pool, the playground, anywhere really on the community that is a point of interest for that tenant. And what we can do is we can pair their answers as well as the time spent in a specific location to really build what is that prospect's potential likes. Do they have animals? Do they like to work out? And if so, that's how we present them with information. So any sort of follow-up email that may come after their tour, if they spent more time in the fitness center and they answered that they work out 3 to 4 days a week, it may be an email that says, hey, check out our fitness center. We do X, Y, Z. But the point being is we're going to be able to more appropriately target based off of their actual needs and wants instead of just hitting them with random emails. So how it works with us is essentially once they've verified, once they've scheduled their time, they will actually visit the community. Upon arriving at the community, it will pop up and say, we've detected via geolocation that you're at the property. As soon as you push yes, it automatically makes or it assigns you a temporary code that would allow you access into the apartment you're there to see, as well as it would allow you access into the common areas in which all are really notated on the actual app itself. So it starts them usually going through the amenities first, leaving at the apartment last, and there's a reason for that I'll get to here in a second. But point being is we have them come in. If it is an hour during the day where it's closed, for instance, we want to make sure they see the outside amenities first, and then if the indoor, again, depending on how the office is set up, it may not be feasible to allow access based on how they've divided their amenities. So there are some variations of how we would allocate access for that person and how we wouldn't. But ultimately, we want them to end up at the apartment. And once they're in the apartment, really at that point, as Sean said, they verify, make sure everything's good up to their standard. And then usually at that point, they're much more likely to sign a lease at that point. So if it's during closed hours, we hope to be able to leverage digital lease signing in the near future. But for right now, it really just gives us an opportunity to set a follow-up with them, and they can actually set that before they leave the property on when they would actually be contacted, when's best, are they interested, that sort of thing. So it's just another way to really get prime leads after the actual tour takes place.
Sean, we talked, during the pre-talk with this, that you not only do you give the resident key, but you also give them some sort of personalized welcome packet. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so if you're going to be a self-tour person, you'll get an email that welcomes you, tells you where to go, and then when you show up at the property, we're going to give you a set of keys and a map, and kind of like a little journey map that walks you it just tells you where you should go, a suggested route, and it will walk you by amenities. We typically don't let people in the amenity spaces like a fitness center or something. We have privacy concerns in a lot of our buildings. You probably have the same thing. We have people who really value their privacy. Maybe they're public figures or something. They don't want people in there having their picture taken of them working out or anything like that. So you can walk by and you can kind of look in. You can see the pool, and they have the unit numbers that they can visit that match their criteria. Like, we already know they're interested in a 2-bedroom when they come, so we only list 2 bedrooms. And they just walk through, and then they come back down and they drop off their keys. Now, in the smart buildings we do have, we would issue them codes if that was the way it worked, but we haven't done a smart building self-tour yet.
Well, hopefully that's going to come soon.
Yeah, so what we do is we have a lot of technology kind of floating around out there. The question is, we really want to get this whole self-touring done, figured out right, kind of the basics, and then we're just going to layer in the technology as it appears to be useful. And for us, useful is whatever makes it the smoothest journey for the prospect to get in and get out and make a decision.
Now, for you guys, where you're not doing maybe the high rises, are you still fairly against letting them see common areas? Is that kind of a decision company wide, or is it kind of property by property? Because it sounds like Taylor and BH are fairly different. They're like, just go tour all the stuff. We want you to get the full experience of the property, see the pool, see the gym, see the clubhouse. Is it full on, or are you guys kind of teetering on both sides?
So on the website, there's a million pictures of the pool and the gym. We just don't want people in there disturbing the residents. I mean, we could tour them in there. I mean, if we were going to let them in, we would have them in with a leasing agent.
So I'm a prospect. I go up, I see the unit, I peek into the gym because I can't get into the gym.
Yeah.
I can look probably window door. And then I go back down to the concierge, and then I ask the concierge, can I go take a look at the gym?
Oh yeah, so what we would do then is if the office wasn't open, we couldn't. But if there was a leasing rep there, the leasing rep would engage. So then it would almost become a regular tour.
A regular tour.
Yeah.
So the concierge are not, you're not leveraging the concierge to take them through amenities.
Well, no, because then they're leaving the front desk, and their goal is really, they serve 2 purposes. One is customer service, but they're also there as a presence to prevent people from just walking in and doing whatever they might do. So.
And Taylor, it seems like on your guys' side, from a common area perspective, you're encouraging it. You want them to see every cool aspect of the property. You want them to really understand what their life is going to be like while they're there. Now, you mentioned something earlier about they can't always see every common area depending on the daytime. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so some of our offices, they have it may have like a pool room or something off the actual leasing office itself, and we don't want to let people into the leasing office with no one being there with our computers and all that.
Sure.
But as long as the actual amenity itself, like if it's the pool, if it's the playground, or the apartment, if anything's freestanding and away from our actual office itself, where we'd be, I would just be concerned of someone coming in, putting in a USB drive and downloading PII. You know what I mean? That's really what we're trying to prevent. I mean, through the authentication process, we already know who they are. Typically, there's also, you put a credit card on file for liability as well, and we'll charge it, make sure it's there, charge $1, you know what I mean? So with the pairing of the beacon, as well as knowing who they are and all of that, as well as the really the release of liability that they have to accept in order to participate in this. They're accepting that if they damage anything, we're going to hold them responsible. So with it's kind of like a trust-based system, really, but we do have a backup. If anything is destroyed, we can still make sure that they pay for the damage that they cause.
That makes sense. Let's talk about hours. Sean, you mentioned a few open for a few hours prior to business hours and a few hours after
Yes.
business hours.
Yeah.
Taylor, same concept? Is not 24/7?
It's not 24/7.
Okay.
But we do, because of course, there's still privacy hours. We don't want people roaming around at 2 o'clock in the morning. Like, that's just not safe. So there are cutoffs, and that's all done per property based on the neighborhood, based on when they feel and where really their personas are. So like if they've identified it's a millennial persona and they know that they typically tour between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m., you know what I mean? Like, we'll make sure it's open till midnight, but then we'll cut it off. And that's really the benefit of having the codes that expire, because if someone does set up a self-touring and they show up, or they don't show up, that code's not just going to stay live, right? It will 100% be disabled if they don't make that window of time. So it's constantly, checks and balances, making sure everything's secure. And at the same time, there are a lot of places within a garden-style community that anybody could technically go once they're in the gate. So really, we leverage the connected aspect and making sure that code only works on certain areas to make sure we're keeping them confined into a certain area. But there is a lot of checks and balances involved in security, for sure.
Sean, so what's kind of the, what you guys are seeing in your early tests, are people actually showing up before and after? Are they leveraging the concept of, hey, I may need to come before work, or I may need to come after work?
Yeah, they like there's a lot of before.
Okay.
And there's some after, but it's just a lot of early birds out there, they want to get there before work, they want to do their stuff,
So 6 a.m.?
No, it's usually 7, I think is the earliest.
Okay.
7's and that's decent hours.
And so the online system that you guys are using for scheduling, it doesn't let you schedule before 7 a.m.? Did you guys configure it? Sounds like, Taylor, you guys are almost a property level configuration. Is that accurate?
As far as the hours go, yeah.
Okay. And is that set by the property manager, the area directors? How does that work?
Typically the regional manager.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so our system, where the technology hasn't caught up yet to self-touring is, we use a system from a vendor, right? And they don't really have the self-touring calendar yet.
Okay.
I think that's something they're thinking about. Because what we would like to do is like to have them book on the calendar. But then someone said the other day, they said, well, why are you do want to know when they come, but we were always thinking we'd only have one person touring kind of serially. But we really think now, this is a recent thought, that we could why not have, if 2 or 3 people want to come at the same time, let them come, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because then you might actually get people thinking that this is a more valuable commodity, create a sense of urgency, which gets back to what we always try to do in person with a tour, but maybe we could do that with self-touring if we bunched some of the self-tours.
Makes sense.
Yeah, very cool. So let's say I come during business hours and I'm a prospect. Obviously, the leasing agents know that there's this, the schedule.
Yeah.
Do they expect that people are going to come in and ask questions eventually? Why don't you take me through that kind of hybrid? It's obviously now, at this point, when they come during business hours and there's a leasing agent on site or a property manager on site to answer extra questions, it becomes a hybrid model, right?
Yeah.
So why don't you guys give me a little bit of strategy on how you guys are handling that? The leasing agents, are they prepared to answer questions? Do they know where the person is? In Taylor's case, it sounds like they may or may not know necessarily the person has showed up. So why don't you, can you give me a little insight into that?
Yeah, so the nice thing about the smart community and with everything being connected is we do have a smart community dashboard that our community managers leverage every day. So with that, they get notifications on, anything from leak issues and maintenance requests that need to be filed to if we have somebody scheduled and on site. So really, we have it capped at 2 people right now. We don't intend to have more than 2 self-tours on site at any given time. And really, that's based off the windows of scheduling. So if it's a 30-minute window that they're actually scheduling, then we'll just make sure that there's only one other person signed up in that 30-minute window. Otherwise, they'd have to select the next 30-minute or the next 30. It's pretty simple, but we just want to make sure there's not more than what the leasing office can handle if it is during office hours, because we do still believe that the personal touch will absolutely win over. And we want to make sure that those leasing agents have the ability to engage with new walk-ins, as well as not being worried about, okay, I've had 2 walk-ins come in and now I have a ping telling me I need to go to this apartment, and I have this ping over here, and there's 6 people in apartments that want to be talked to. It's too much. So we're going to limit it right now. We'll see how that really is handled. But the big thing we want to make sure is that those that are doing the self-tour, they have access, if it is during office hours, to a leasing agent, but we don't necessarily want it to where they have to have that leasing agent in order to engage in the tour. Because we feel that really with the younger demographic and really just that self-serve mindset, that it's important to allow for those residents to come in and do it at their own pace without feeling like they're, buying a car and a car salesman just standing there like, what do you think? What do you want this car? What do you want this car? Like, it's too much. And I think more than anything, that's actually what scares people away, because they can't do the verification that Sean was talking about. They're just bombarded, and it doesn't make for a positive experience. So we think that it's better for them to kind of come in the door, creep their toe in the water, make sure they're comfortable, and then invite the conversation, as opposed to kind of being hard sold constantly.
Oh. Can you share any metrics of the people who do tour during business hours, who are the ones that are totally self-sufficient, don't talk to anybody, and of those who actually do come back to the leasing office and actually spend some time with the leasing agent? Do you have any ratio numbers that you guys can share with us? I know it's still early on in the testing, but I think the audience may like to hear what you guys are experiencing so far with that.
I would say during office hours, they'll talk to the concierge, they'll develop a report, which is why the concierge role is very important in a self-touring scenario, at least for us. And almost no one sees the leasing agents.
No one?
No. The leasing agent is all about setting the appointment and following up.
Yep. Good. Taylor, anything so far?
Unfortunately, I don't have any metrics, just because we haven't implemented it on a large enough scale to really determine that. But as soon as we have it, I promise we'll share.
So kind of next thing I want to talk about, we've talked about this actually a lot, specifically with Taylor's, is the common area, community, and unit access. Obviously, Taylor was talking about smart homes and smart locks, and depending on your property configuration, you really have to understand what you're implementing and have full control, especially over the locks, to be able to properly get the person throughout the community. I have this slide up here. It's kind of showing at least some primary, we'll call them access points, that need to be connected and controlled and also synced in to the self-showing system, especially in Taylor's case, to be a successful journey. Sean, I know you guys aren't necessarily leveraging smart locks right now, but I know you guys do a lot of access control. Yeah. It's a big part of your world. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing with that front?
Okay, so if you look at the chart, right, I'd say the whole bottom level is a person, and that's the concierge.
Yep.
And then the next level up, which is a unit door, that's really, right now, a physical key or a fob. If it was a smart apartment, it would be a code. So that's how it is right now.
In terms of base building stuff, though, can you talk about how important it is, though, to have that kind of integrated into the entire system in order for the self-showing system to work? And maybe, Taylor, you can also jump into this, too, because you mentioned that the prospect gets a code. That code works not only on the unit door, or gets a credential, let's call it, and that works not on the unit door, but other doors. And in the smart apartment and smart building space, typically they're not always synced in well. So if you guys, would you give me a little background on that?
Yeah, so that's where the real-time connected smart home is very important, because there's a couple of different, and I don't want to get too far down the smart home topic by any means, but there really are 2 different types of smart homes that are being implemented. There are the passive type smart homes, which leverage like Bluetooth and the technologies that really don't have a constantly active connection. And then there are the systems that are like real-time active connected to the internet, such as like the Z-Wave-based systems, Zigbee-based systems. And with real-time connectivity, we can constantly make sure that every lock that's within a certain ecosystem has whatever code we need it to have, because it's happening in real time. And that's really why we focus on our smart home implementations having that real-time connected component. As Mitch said, if we were to go with the passive type smart home, it would be very difficult for us to say, okay, this 4-digit code is going to work on your apartment and also work on every amenity area. And then whenever it expires, it'll expire all at the same time. No, it's very, depending on the implementation style, you may have to provide multiple codes based off of where they're supposed to have access to. But where our strategy comes into play is really that real-time connected environment and the ability to push out those codes as soon as they're supposed to be pushed out and revoking them as soon as they're supposed to be revoked.
So I'm with you. I think you want to have the always on, you want to have smart locks. There are electronic locks and then there are smart locks. So you want locks that are smart, that you can always control who has access. So in our case, in the self-touring, there's really 3 kind of use cases. One is what we've been describing. The second one is someone's going to come back. They've already come once and they want to come back with spouse or roommate or something. So that would be a perfect self-touring, give them a code, and they could get through the front door, the elevator, and the unit all with one shot. That would be a great thing. And
that seems like that's the ultimate journey right there.
Yeah, that would be good because they've already been by once. We feel pretty good about them. And the other case is people come back because they want to measure or something like that. They don't need any human interaction to do that. Again, you could just give them a code. They could just go in and do what they want.
Yeah, Taylor, you mentioned the passive Bluetooth. It seems like the code generation and the code delivery is much lower friction than the Bluetooth. Use your phone to get into multiple doors throughout the community. It seems, is that fair to say what BH is?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it gives us more visibility. I mean, in the elevator example here, I mean, if the unit they're going to view is, say, on the 4th floor, and they have to have a code to get in the elevator, which is not necessarily common in the older builds, but in a lot of the newer developments, they're putting in credentials into the actual elevator. So with that, we could ensure that that person would only have access to that 4th floor, getting them to the apartment they're viewing, as opposed to just getting into the elevator and clicking on any floor they want to go to and just kind of going on an exploratory mission, right? It really will help us control exactly what the route is that they're taking. And if they deviate from that route, we can always send based off of where the beacons that are in each of the individual places that are being toured. If they stray too far, it'll actually send them a notification and say like, hey, you've strayed off the path, please return, or we will have to call a security agent. So I mean, there are protocols and security built into this. It's definitely still a work in process, but that's kind of how we're dealing with it right this second.
You mentioned earlier property managers, because the system's online, it sounds like they get pinged, they get notified as the prospect is kind of going through their tours. Is that pretty accurate?
Well, no. So they'll get if they come in the morning, let's say they turn on their computer and they say, okay, I've seen that we've had 3 self-tours scheduled last night for today. So they're notified of the windows of time that the people will be on site and really when they're supposed to be taking place. And if it's missed, if the window is missed, they'll get a notification saying this individual did not show up, this code is expired, just so they know if someone comes in the office and says, hey, this isn't working, they can say, oh yeah, we saw you missed your window of time, we can go ahead and get you a new code assigned and let you continue about your day. But at very least, we're not going to worry about the tenants just coming at any point in time and like I said, getting lost throughout the community. So
now we see the smart home actually be more useful on the front end, which is that if these are the units that people are going to self-tour today, and I have a SmartRent, smart home scenario. There's SmartRent, right?
Plugged it. He plugged it.
A little bit of a shameless plug there. No big deal.
Plug there, a little Freudian slip. But anyway, so what you do is you say, all right, well, I'm going to put this in model mode. I'm going to turn the temperature to 72. I'm going to open. Well, we don't have blinds, but we have temperature. We might put in a scent machine. We might have the lights on. So we kind of can prep the unit electronically and automatically without having to go up there.
So it's basically an automated showing scene.
Yeah. Exactly.
Very cool.
So we kind of like that idea.
Speaking of units and vacant units and models, are model units still important? Are they still necessary? Let's talk about that real quick. I know we kind of mentioned it earlier, but I think the audience wants to hear how you guys view models.
All right. Well, I'm going to stray from the corporate script here. So, if you look at our apartments, we typically have like 40 floor plans, 50 floor plans. We have huge numbers of floor plans. And when we built these things or bought them, that was one of the features. It's, oh, we have unique floor plans. So to think that you could go to a model and have it really even look like the apartment you're going to see, I mean, you might as well play the lottery, right? I mean, the chances are very slim that that's going to be the case. So I would say if you have a really nice model on the web, which again, you can even do digitally, you can just kind of make it, you can make a kind of a digital pastiche of a model.
3D tours.
Yeah, which we do a lot of. People want to see, this is the other thing we learned, people want to see the actual unit they're going to live in. That's very important. So I would say I would de-emphasize models. And so in our case, in California, we don't have models anymore. In our other properties, we're going from 2 models to 1. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the day when all the models are gone, but we're not there yet, and that's kind of a discussion point in our company.
And speaking real quick, for the properties that do have the models, are you doing self-showings there? And if so, do they go to the model or do they go to the vacant unit that they want to see?
Yeah. So in the self-showing scenario, they don't go to the model.
Okay, there it is, folks. They don't go to the model.
So,
Taylor?
Yeah, there are a lot of large institutions that are primarily just owners, and they work with us, kind of as the operators, that they recognize this technology is going to allow them to eliminate the models, and that's actually how they're planning to pay for this new technology that they're implementing. So with the money that they're losing right now off just, let's say, 3 models, I mean, it's almost $100,000 a year, depending on what community it is. So when you look at the cost savings and how much that can redirect towards infrastructure and innovation and technology, but also still allow you to leverage the best possible experience and really give the tenant and the prospect the feel of what it's going to look like living in that specific apartment. I mean, I can tell you, I went and viewed one while I was living in Phoenix, and the model was like, oh yeah, these are darker cabinets. The one that you're looking at's lighter cabinets. And oh, you had stainless steel. These ones aren't stainless steel. So like the model that I was being shown didn't have the appliance package I was paying for, didn't have the cabinets I was paying for, didn't have anything at all that I was actually going to be paying for. So it kind of made me realize that this is kind of a waste of time, to be honest. So we definitely feel that the model units will be necessary probably in the next 12 to 24 months. But once we feel confident enough that we can deploy this at scale and truly start to see those metrics that you were asking for, I think very quickly you're going to see all the models disappear, and that'll be a permanent shift.
Yeah, and I think it's one of these long tail things, right? I mean, models have been around forever, right? And they're going to still be around, and some people would want to see the models, just like some people want to talk to a leasing agent. We did a survey, I think I alluded to the survey, and 90% of the people thought that the leasing agent was a vital part of the leasing process, yet 95% of the people wanted to spend a half hour or less on the tour. So, I mean, I think there's just a mix of people out there, and not everyone's going to do a self-tour. We think like a third of the situations are really good self-tour candidates, and the other ones are really hybrid or full tour. So it's not a 100% solution, and again, it's because there's just such a mix of people out there who have different ways or preferences for how they want to do things.
Yeah, on the slide up on the screen before, the other question I had was voice assistants. Obviously, everyone is probably familiar with Google Home, Amazon Alexa. I know there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to leverage an Alexa skill or Google Home action to do some virtual leasing or virtual assistance, call it, for lack of a better term, while they're in the unit. Do you guys have, I know you're not necessarily doing model units, do you have any strategies around leveraging voice control and voice assistant throughout the tour, maybe even in the common areas as well, or in the unit to be, if you're walking into the unit, it says, without a leasing agent there, could you ask Alexa, what's the rent at this place? What are the amenities? What are the nearby businesses? You should kind of share. Is that a thing? Is that proven? Is that a waste of time? Waste of money?
You want to?
Oh yeah, sure. I know that those specific examples, as far as asking about the community, I know Amazon's working on that, and I know there are some cool things coming in that realm, but as far as like implementing those, being like, what is the rent exactly, give me back specific information, we're not leveraging it that way, but we do have it set up to where if they walk in, it'll tell them like, say, Alexa, I'm home, and as soon as they say that, it springs to life, right? Like you'll see the TV come on and the lights come on and the thermostat kick down. So we leverage it in a way where they can come in, we give them a couple of very simple commands, and then those commands, they really get to see how the environment changes around them. Because at this point, I think smart home is really still in a bubble. It doesn't have quite the embracement that it's going to need. And really, with that as well, we don't want to necessarily distract the tenant, get them so focused on talking to this virtual assistant that they forget that they're on a tour. So we want to make sure they can use it, experience something, but that ultimately their focus is still on, I'm here to view the apartment, you know what I mean? Does this fit my need? And they don't get bogged down on like community issues and community topics and stuff like that.
So when the tenant walks into one of your units, it's not the primary goal for them to be able to speak to Alexa to ask questions.
Correct.
Sean, any
Yeah, so we use the voice assistant in the smart apartment models. Alexa's nice. It's a nice feature to have.
Right.
But we haven't really figured out in the vacant apartments, we would have to go up there and actually put the Alexa in if it's worth doing that.
And are you guys, no one's doing any skills where you can ask Alexa all these questions related to the property? Doing anything like that or no?
I think there are vendors out there who are doing that now, but we might try some, but we haven't done it yet.
Okay.
Well, and I think what's cool, just to build off that, so we've noticed there are some different pieces of hardware that you may already had planned to pay for, such as like a light switch, that actually they're building Alexa into now. So you're not having to like put a physical, voice assistant in the unit. We can install one in the actual light switches or something like that, similar, because there are multiple different applications. But that way you always have that voice assistance, but it's not necessarily something that the residents are going to take with them whenever they leave.
Cool. Let's talk about after the tour. What are the different ways you guys are collecting information, getting back to people, following up with people? I know there's a bunch of varying strategies similar to how the validation and authentication process is. Can you guys share what you guys are doing both on the post-tour follow-up? Sean, why don't you go first?
Yeah, it's just, so you think self-touring is this kind of new thing. After self-touring, it is just 100% classic trying to close a prospect. It is follow-up, follow-up, follow-up. That's really what it's all about. I mean, we know that they're there. We know they're coming on tour. We call them, we email them, we do whatever we have to do to try to close them, just like we would do any other prospect.
Now you mentioned, with the concierge model, does the concierge do anything specific when the prospect brings the keys back?
Oh, he might, make small talk and chat and ask how they liked it, and but he or she is not selling.
Right.
They might have kind of a sales kind of orientation to themselves, but they're not really selling. They're not going to get a commission.
Does the packet that you give them, this personalized or semi-personalized welcome packet, does that have instructions for an online application? Anything?
Yeah. So it's a trifold. 8.5 by 11 with a card stock in the middle that lists it's just almost a fact list. It's like, here's the property, this is what the rents are, this is what the parking is, this is what the app fee is, this is how much it costs to have a pet. These are the amenities. So it's really just, it's just a good thing for them to have to say, oh yeah, these are all the things that property had. It's just something they can take away with them.
Do you guys do anything like a QR code at the bottom where the person can scan the QR code and like the online app pops up right in their face? Nothing like that yet?
No, we haven't.
Good idea though.
It is good. I mean, the first good idea we had was to actually, after we did this, to actually put the name of the property on it, because the first time we did it, we didn't have the name of the property on it, so. But we learned that lesson.
Taylor, would you mind sharing some of the BH's strategies for post-tour? It's obviously a bit different. Any type of automated, hey, how's a tour? Online application link, stuff like that. Can you share us?
Absolutely. So what's key about the self-tour that we're looking to develop and we are developing is really, it's not done on a site-by-site level. We're looking at it more as there's one app that would be downloaded for our entire portfolio. So with that, we can use that app as kind of a constant means of communicating with the resident. and prospect depending on where they're at in the process. But essentially, if let's say they've toured 3 or 4 properties all throughout the same system, we will have collected quite a bit of info. As I mentioned, there are some peppers of questions that we'll throw in there. And if there are sometimes, let's say they say, no, we don't work out, but then we see that the Beacon, they spent more time in the gym than anywhere else, then we'll put that back into the fold and say, are you sure, how many days do you work out? You know what I mean? Making sure that at very least, if there are holes, they have multiple opportunities to answer the same question. So that way we're not just getting their answer and then taking them off that list forever. So with that, we can build custom profiles, and I think that's really the trend in our whole industry right now, not just with apps and beacons, but also with our websites. We really want to customize the experience. We really want to make sure that the residents are being fed the most relevant information so we can get the highest amount of conversions possible. So we just really try to take advantage of all those customization technologies that exist today and implement those alongside our pre-existing follow-up strategy just to enhance it overall.
And you mentioned an app for a full portfolio app. Does that app include an online application, online lease signing, or is that not yet? Is that in the works? Can you?
It would be nice. I haven't seen the it really should be, okay, let me take a step back. That should really, in my opinion, exist in a blockchain system before we get to that point, just so we have all the verification in place. Because once a lease is digitally signed in blockchain, we'd be able to, recall that lease at any point. And that brings a whole nother conversation as far as background and all that stuff. So we're not there yet. We're focusing on the touring component right now, but we do expect in the next few years that will become a standard of the process, yeah.
Cool. Kind of to wrap up, we've talked about implementation strategies. Haven't talked specifically about the ROI, but obviously all of that whole process relates to higher conversions, maximizing ROI. Would you guys mind? I know Sean, you had some interesting takes on some of the staff appreciating the idea of the self-touring system and leveraging it to maybe do some. To not have to work on the weekends or something? Yeah. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, they like that idea, and they like the idea. Leasing agents have to do a lot of things. You pay them a salary, and then you pay them a commission to lease, but a lot of what they do is customer service or just other stuff that just takes up a lot of time in their day. So, what we're thinking with the self-touring is they're not out there, walking a unit with a resident who already knows that that's a sink that they're looking at. The leasing agent doesn't have to tell them it's a sink, right? They don't have to breathe. They don't have to have the prospect feel like they can't be honest with their spouse or roommate who's there because the leasing agent is there listening to them. So it takes a lot of stress out of the job, right? And they can focus on the things we really want them to do, which is basically make appointments and sell apartments.
Close deals.
Yeah, that's really why it's good. And then the fact that in these buildings that have concierge, you can leverage the concierge. That's a good thing too.
Yeah.
So we feel it's good for flexibility.
And Taylor, you mentioned, I think earlier on, the tools that you guys are using out there are allowing you to filter out a lot of the poor or bad leads that are coming in. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit more and share?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Sean hit it on the head, is that we have a lot of responsibilities resting on our leasing agents' shoulders right now. They're customer service agents, they're salesmen, they're everything, right? And even a counselor for those residents that need someone to talk to on occasion. So we really want to make sure that they're allowed and really maximizing their time as much as possible, and we feel that this type of system is going to allow them to spend less time dealing with just random walk-ins, because of 5 walk-ins in a day, there may be 1 lease, right? Like per agent, typically between 1 and 2. But if we can get that down from 5 showings to 2 showings in that day, they still get that lease closed, but now they have that additional window of time that they would have been touring 3 other people. That's a huge chunk of time in their day that we're saving them. And that's really how they're viewing this technology. They don't look at it as something that's going to replace them. They look at it as something that is going to allow them more flexibility, more time, and ultimately they're going to be able to close more leases because, if they do have those three opportunities that they're no longer wasting their time on, and we have another person come in that is a pretty much pre-qualified lead through the self-touring, there's a chance they'll close 2, maybe 3 leases in that day and get 3 times the commission that they would have gotten previously because they're not spending so much time touring people that may not even necessarily qualify to live at the property. So I know there are a lot of legalities as far as which state and how we have to approach that from a fair housing perspective, but we are making sure, and we've seen plenty of opportunity that doesn't go against the law that we have to follow, that we can still allow this level of flexibility.
Great, and would you guys mind sharing as much as you can, of course? I know you're both doing some early tests. Any success, any metrics you can share from the initial tests from both sides? Sean?
I think, I don't have any hard statistics, but the general impression is from the people who are running these pilot programs are doing is that the residents really like it and the staff really like it, or the prospects, sorry.
Yeah, it seems like they prefer it in a lot of cases.
I think they do, because you got to realize they've spent their whole life. They are Olympic quality due diligence experts because they've spent their whole life on the internet doing due diligence. So they can just come in, and this is really just an extension of the due diligence they've done on the website, and they're verifying what they saw. And if they're ready to go, they're just going to do it.
Hit the nail on the head, 100%. As far as actual metrics, no, but what I can tell you is we do, and we have recognized that anybody that's gone through the self-tour and requests to engage in a leasing conversation, they're much more likely to sign a lease than if it was just someone that's walking in and off. So can't give you specifics on what that looks like, but I can tell you it definitely has been confirmed to be a much better use of time for those leads that we send their way.
Well, great. We're running out of time. We've got a few minutes left. I wanted to quickly open it up for Q&A. Anybody out there have any questions? We've got a couple, okay. Gentleman in the back, he looks like he's got a microphone coming up to him.
Hey, great session. Taylor and Sean, if you're building a property today, what would be the things that would make it easier to roll out smart technology?
That's a great question. Ooh. I think the biggest is infrastructure. So if it's a new development, specifically, most of the IoT and smart home systems are essentially plug and play. But if you can, be able to determine, all right, we're not using, mortise door locks, we're using normal deadbolts, and we need, you understand that you're going to sell Wi-Fi, so you're going to have a community Wi-Fi hookup, or you're not. These things that you would be making decisions on as far as infrastructure is concerned, that would ultimately help you really with whatever implementation you need to move towards. But I would say if you can have community Wi-Fi, it's definitely a little bit better experience for the resident, but it's not necessarily preferred for all the owner-operators out there. And then really from a smart home infrastructure component, I would say take advantage of the leak detection sensors and all the things that can really help you in preventative maintenance and really keeping the overall operating cost of your asset as low as possible.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite topics. So I would say you'd want to have an integrated base building and apartment smart system. That would be the first thing you'd want. You'd want an owner Wi-Fi network, so you have Wi-Fi all the way through the property, not into the units, but in the hallways and the common areas where you could peel off a piece for Wi-Fi calling if your cell phone service is bad. And between those two things, you would really be able to really leverage that technology for self-touring, because then you could issue codes that expire like you talked about. You'd know where people were if that was important to you, and you could have a great experience.
Next question.
Hi, I was just wondering if you have considered or looked into augmented reality at all, and getting rid of models, and could you the beacon pop up, click this link to view your furnished apartment through your phone?
Yeah, that's definitely something we've looked into for sure. It's not something that we've paired necessarily with the self-touring yet, but I believe we're going to go there. I mean, there's a lot of great platforms, like Roomie is one of them, that lets you take a picture or pull out your phone and see in augmented reality different pieces of furniture. And if it is something that we utilize, then of course we would want to make sure that's available. But it's not something that we're including in this ecosystem at this time.
Yeah, and for us, I'd say augmented reality, no, because I think that's just another piece of technology that gets in the way between the resident and the apartment, right? If you have to put on goggles or something. On the other hand, complete computer animation of everything so it looks totally real. We've done a lot of that. shameless plug, if you go to waterlinesquare.com, it's a condo that we're building in New York. Every one of those pictures is computer generated. There's not a single real one on there, and they're just beautiful. I mean, you would never know.
Any other questions up front?
Thank you very much for the session. In the high-end condo area, sometimes they will have a building and they'll actually leave the vacants unlocked. Would you ever consider running a community where the vacants are really just unlocked and you have cameras in there until you have the smart technology up and running?
Want to go first?
I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, we have some, and dirty little secret, some of the vacants are unlocked, right, just because we forget to lock them, but.
You need a smart home system that will automatically lock them at the end of business hours.
That's true, that's what we would have, yes, it would set the temperature so we wouldn't have bad utility bills.
Yeah.
So.
I would be terrified to answer that question, to be honest. I don't think any of our clients would be happy if we told them we were leaving doors unlocked, which is why we hope that.
Well, you wouldn't tell them.
Definitely. Well, we would hope not. Yes. Our next conversation may not be which apartment are we using. That's. But I mean, if that's what you guys do, and you would be comfortable with any liability that would associate from that, I mean, I'd say go for it, experiment with it for sure, but I would say be prepared if you don't have some sort of like security system or back channel system to fix any sort of damage or anything like that. Just be prepared for the worst, because unfortunately we always have to be prepared for the worst, but most of the time it's not a worst case scenario.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Is that okay back there? I think right up front here.
When you said that there's going to be really cool things with voice recognition, and you said that a voice recognition. When you said there was really cool things coming with voice recognition in the apartments, and you said there would be a voice recognition Alexa component built into the light switch, does that mean that the resident doesn't actually have to have an Alexa device for it to work? And where else might those types of voice recognition elements start to pop up?
So yes, for one, absolutely. It would absolutely really replace the need for them to have any sort of freestanding Alexa device. We've seen them in light switches. We've seen them in, I'm trying to think, there was another like
Fire alarms.
Yeah, fire alarms.
Thermostats.
Any types of smart, I mean, Ecobee has one now, I think.
Ecobee has a thermostat. Their most recent thermostat has Alexa built in. My guess is Nest version of their thermostat is going to have Google Home built in. I don't know when that's coming out, but I believe First Alert has a fire smoke alarm that has it built in as well. They typically need, if they're going to be built in, they're going to be in an existing device that's necessary to be in there, and obviously it has to be wired. You cannot use battery. Alexas just take up too much power from that perspective. One more question, yeah, in front.
Are you having anybody request to have a self-guided tour? To take a self-guided
Great question.
I'll let you start with that one.
I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, we offer them. I don't know if anyone's ever requested one. I don't know.
Do you advertise it?
Yes. So if you go to our website for the properties we have, it say take a self-guided tour, and we walk you through the process to sign up.
Does it clarify that it's a real self-guided in-person tour as opposed to a virtual tour online?
Oh yeah, I mean it's pretty obvious, yeah. Because you can take virtual. There are virtual tours on the website too. You can do virtual tours on the models and the common areas. So.
Absolutely. Just we are definitely being asked for it, which is why we're trying our best. But I don't know how many people ask, if that makes sense.
Great. Any other questions out there? Well, thank you for your time. Thank you to Taylor and Sean for sharing with us today.